Buzzard school administrator reported the girl's extended absence from an independent studies program. Authorities say Melodee's mother has been uncooperative with the investigation.
We're showing up today so that way, she knows we care. We're here for Melodee, and hopefully she will come out and tell us where she's at.
9-year-old Melodee Buzzard has vanished under troubling circumstances. School officials flagged her absence last week after she failed to enroll in her independent study program, Avenue Home, and found only her mother, Ashley Buzzard, who offered no explanation for Melodee's disappearance.
A 9-year-old girl disappears, and no one notices for almost a year. Her mother drives across states, returns home alone, and refuses to say a single word. No witnesses, no goodbye. No trace except a burned fireplace and a car that went all the way to Nebraska. What really happened to Melodee Buzzard? Was she hidden, hurt, or still out there somewhere waiting to be found? If your child vanished for a year and no one realized, would you blame the mother, the system, or all of us? What do you think happened? Nine-year-old Melodee Buzzard once lived a quiet life in the small community of Vandenberg Village, California. To neighbors, she was almost invisible, a child seen only occasionally in the yard of a modest beige house on Mars Avenue. She lived there alone with her mother, Ashley Buzzard, a woman described by relatives as withdrawn, intelligent, and increasingly fragile after years of loss. Melodee's father, Rubiel Meza, had died in a motorcycle crash in 2016. When his daughter was barely 6 months old. That accident became the silent fracture in Ashley's life. In the aftermath, she severed contact with nearly everyone, including Rubiel's family, retreating behind the walls of her home and turning inward. Over time, isolation became both her refuge and her cage. At first, Ashley told relatives she wanted to protect her daughter from a cruel world. She withdrew Melodee from public school and began homeschooling. A decision that, while not unusual, created a cocoon that few could see inside. Friends stopped visiting. Her mother, Lori Miranda, said she hadn't spoken to Ashley in nearly 2 years. The local community barely knew Melodee existed. It was as if mother and daughter had folded themselves out of the world's reach. For several years, there was no official record of Melodee's schooling, no medical visits, no family contact. Then, in August 2025, a flicker of normalcy appeared. Ashley and Melodee arrived at Mission Valley Independent Study, part of the Lompoc Unified School District, to register for an independent learning program. Staff members remembered the visit vividly. The girl seemed shy but alert, a little small for her age, clutching a folder of enrollment papers while her mother did all the talking. That day became the last verified sighting of Melodee in a school environment. Over the following weeks, no one from the district heard from Ashley again. Emails and phone calls went unanswered. Assignments were never picked up. By early October, attendance officers marked the absence as concerning. Then came the discovery that would shift the case from a routine welfare check to a missing person investigation. Investigators later confirmed that on October 7, 2025, Melodee had been seen traveling with her mother in a white Chevrolet Malibu rental car. The vehicle's GPS data traced a route stretching hundreds of miles out of Santa Barbara County, possibly as far as Nebraska, nearly 600 miles away. It was an inexplicable trip for a single mother who rarely left her neighborhood. The car was eventually returned, but when Ashley drove back into California, she was alone. There was no record of Melodee ever reappearing. By October 14, administrators at Mission Valley could no longer ignore the gap. 1 year had nearly passed since anyone outside the Buzzard household had truly seen the little girl. Concerned, the school filed an official report with the Santa Barbara County Sheriff's Office, triggering a welfare check at the family's home on Mars Avenue. Deputies knocked on the door that evening. No one answered. The following morning, officers returned and found Ashley inside. When questioned about her daughter's whereabouts, she offered no clear explanation. She claimed she was overwhelmed and asked to be left alone. That was the moment the search for Melodee Buzzard officially began. Detectives entered the house, expecting perhaps a runaway or a temporary misunderstanding. Instead, they found an eerily quiet space, a child's bedroom that looked untouched, school books unopened, dust gathered on toys. There was no sign of recent life, no clues of where a 9-year-old girl might have gone. Within 24 hours, the sheriff's office elevated the case to a missing person investigation, labeling Melodee as an risk child. On October 20, 2025, the department issued a public update acknowledging that the girl had last been seen with her mother and that her disappearance was now under active investigation. At that point, the FBI joined the case, expanding the search across multiple states. Agents examined toll records, rental car data, and surveillance footage in hopes of retracing Ashley's cross-country drive. In a press statement, Lieutenant Chris Gottschall, head of the Criminal Investigations Division, credited the school district for noticing the warning signs. Lompoc Unified School District deserves credit for recognizing that something wasn't right, reaching out, and continuing to assist with this investigation, he said. Then he added a line that would come to define the tone of the entire case. This important update helps narrow a significant gap in the timeline of when she was last known to be seen, and because of that, we're closer to understanding what happened to Melodee. But despite his optimism, the reality was sobering. No verified sighting of Melodee existed after October 7. There were no bank withdrawals, no medical appointments, no neighbors who could say they saw the girl outside her home. When reporters knocked on Ashley's door days later, she refused to answer questions. Her garage door remained half open for days, lights flickering at night, and pieces of burned paper appeared in her fireplace. To investigators, every new silence seemed to echo louder than the last. As the days passed, the small community of Lompoc began to take notice. Parents who had never met Melodee joined online groups, sharing her photo, one of the few images available, taken 2 years earlier. Posters appeared on telephone poles and storefronts. The question, "Where is Melodee Buzzard?" became a rallying cry in a town that had suddenly realized a child could disappear in plain sight. Yet even amid growing public concern, the timeline raised haunting questions. How could a girl vanish for more than a year without a single welfare check, without a neighbor calling, without any documentation from the state? How could a child simply fade away between the cracks of homeschooling, grief, and bureaucracy? Authorities remain careful in their wording. Officially, the case is a missing person investigation, not a homicide. There are no suspects, no charges, only a widening gulf between the last confirmed sighting and the present moment. Every new press release repeats the same phrase. The goal is to verify Melodee's location and welfare. But as each day passes, that goal feels further from reach. For the people who loved her, her grandmother Lori, her aunts Vicky and Elizabeth, her half-sister Corinna, the hardest part isn't the absence of answers. It's the possibility that no one noticed soon enough to save her. One aunt put it bluntly during a candlelight vigil. It's like she vanished, and the world didn't even blink. The story of Melodee Buzzard is more than a mystery. It's a reflection of a system built on trust. That parents act in their child's best interest. That schools will notice warning signs. That community means someone is watching. But what happens when all those layers of protection fall away, one by one? As investigators piece together the fragments, a rental car, a withdrawn mother, a year of silence, the question remains suspended above the case like a shadow. Why did no one realize a little girl had been missing for nearly an entire year? Investigators began to assemble the fragments of Melodee Buzzard's final known movements, like pieces of a puzzle that refused to fit neatly together. The last verified sighting was October 7, 2025, when she was reportedly traveling with her mother, Ashley Buzzard, in a white Chevrolet Malibu rental car. The car, later traced through rental company records, logged more than 600 miles before it was returned. Its GPS data and toll transactions suggested a long journey that reached well beyond California, possibly as far as Nebraska. When the vehicle was eventually dropped off and inspected, Ashley was alone. There was no trace of her 9-year-old daughter. That single fact, a mother seen leaving with her child, but returning without her, became the foundation for the first and strongest working theory, parental concealment. The FBI joined the case on October 20, expanding the search across state lines. Their mandate was clear: find proof that Melodee was alive and determine whether her mother had deliberately hidden her. Agents subpoenaed highway surveillance, fuel receipts, and digital location data in hopes of reconstructing the cross-country road. What they were confronting was not a conventional kidnapping by a stranger, but something more complicated: a potential custodial interference case under California law, where a parent unlawfully deprives another guardian or the state of lawful custody or access to a child. Under California Penal Code Section 278.5, custodial interference, often called parental abduction, occurs when a parent takes, conceals, or withholds a child from the lawful custodian or from the court's jurisdiction. Unlike stranger abductions, these cases are usually steeped in emotion, fear of losing custody, mistrust of institutions, or mental instability. Prosecutors must prove intent, that the parent deliberately hid or kept the child away to prevent lawful access, and that the child's welfare was potentially endangered. The law recognizes that a parent can commit a crime even without crossing borders, but crossing state lines, as Ashley allegedly did, transforms it into a federal concern. In Melodee's case, no custody battle existed. Her father had died years earlier, and her mother had full legal guardianship. That raised a paradox: how could a parent abduct a child who was already legally in her care? The answer lies in the concealment clause. If Ashley removed Melodee from oversight from schools, doctors, or social workers, with intent to keep her location unknown to authorities, it would still qualify as custodial interference. What began as homeschooling could have quietly evolved into isolation, and isolation into disappearance. Family members feared precisely that. They described Ashley as increasingly paranoid, convinced that outside forces, including CPS, were plotting to take Melodee away. According to relatives, Ashley's distrust of government agencies dated back to 2016, when CPS temporarily intervened after reports of unsanitary living conditions. Although the child was later returned, the experience left a lasting scar. From that moment, Ashley appeared determined never to let the state or anyone else interfere with her parenting again. When the school district reported Melodee's extended absence in October 2025, some investigators speculated that Ashley might have taken her daughter on the road precisely to avoid another CPS evaluation. The timing fits: a new school registration in August, a sudden disappearance in early October, and a mother known for her fear of losing control. Parental concealment, in such cases, is often motivated not by malice, but by a distorted sense of protection. A parent convinces herself that the world is hostile, that removing the child from oversight is an act of love rather than harm. But even within that framework, questions multiply. If Ashley was trying to keep Melodee safe, where is the child now? Why did the mother return to California without her and refuse to answer even the simplest inquiries? Detectives acknowledge that the evidence stops abruptly. There is no surveillance showing Melodee in Nebraska, no confirmed witness sightings, no credit card trail beyond what the rental car's GPS provides. Every line of investigation runs into silence. The FBI's behavioral analysts noted that cases of maternal concealment often follow a psychological arc: fear, flight, concealment, and collapse. The parent's mental health deteriorates as reality bends under the weight of paranoia. In interviews, family members described Ashley's thinking as fragmented, oscillating between moments of lucidity and bursts of irrational suspicion. She reportedly believed that others were watching her house, that school officials were conspiring to take her child. To her, disappearance may have seemed like escape. Yet the theory, as compelling as it sounds, rests on circumstantial evidence. There is no direct proof that Melodee is alive, and no proof she is dead. Without a body, a message, or a witness, the case floats in limbo. Law enforcement officials cannot charge Ashley with a crime solely for refusing to cooperate, and they have found no sign that she fled the state or attempted to destroy evidence. In fact, she remains in her home, maintaining the appearance of normal life, an unsettling contrast to the growing public suspicion outside her door. Some legal experts caution against assuming guilt. They note that uncooperative does not always equal criminal. A person suffering from mental illness or extreme stress may avoid communication without consciously hiding a crime. Moreover, California law sets a high bar for parental abduction charges, particularly when only one legal guardian exists. Prosecutors would need to show not only that Melodee was hidden, but that she was deprived of necessary care or endangered. So far, no such evidence has surfaced. The uncertainty echoes two other infamous cases: Harmony Montgomery in New Hampshire and J.J. Vallow in Idaho. In both, parental or custodial figures used silence and seclusion to mask a child's disappearance. Harmony, a 5-year-old girl, vanished in 2019, but wasn't reported missing until 2 years later. Her father and stepmother offered conflicting stories until investigators discovered that neglect and deception had erased her from public systems. J.J. Vallow's case, entwined with apocalyptic beliefs and mental illness, revealed how familial secrecy can spiral into tragedy. Each case began with parents who insisted they were protecting their children and ended with national outrage when the truth emerged. Melodee's disappearance carries similar hallmarks. Like Harmony, she had vanished within a bureaucratic blind spot created by homeschooling and limited oversight. Like JJ, she was tethered to a parent whose grasp on reality may have been slipping. Both precedents underline a painful truth. When protection turns into isolation, the line between safety and harm becomes almost invisible. FBI investigators have publicly stated that their goal is not to assign guilt, but to locate the child. They continue to treat the case as a missing person investigation rather than a homicide. Agents believe that by focusing on the route to Nebraska gas stations, motel check-ins, surveillance footage along Interstate 40, they may still find someone who saw Melodee alive. The Bureau's Missing Children Unit emphasizes that recoveries often hinge on public recognition. 1 in 6 missing minors, they note, is found because a member of the public sees a photo and makes a call. Even so, each day without contact dims that hope. Inside the sheriff's office, detectives review the same footage and same data, waiting for a fragment of certainty. Outside, neighbors pass by the Buzzard home where blinds stay closed and the air feels unnaturally still. The parental concealment theory remains the most plausible narrative. A mother, gripped by fear and delusion, takes her daughter away from the world to protect her, then loses control of whatever plan she thought she had. Yet until new evidence surfaces, a sighting, a voice, a clue, the story of Melodee Buzzard stays suspended between crime and tragedy, between a mother's silence and a child the world can no longer see. Among the theories surrounding the disappearance of 9-year-old Melodee Buzzard, one of the most troubling is the possibility that her mother, Ashley Buzzard, may have harmed her either unintentionally or deliberately during a prolonged psychological breakdown. From the very beginning, relatives and neighbors painted a portrait of a woman who had been living on the edge of collapse for years, slowly unraveling in the shadows of grief and paranoia. Both Lori Miranda, Ashley's mother, and Elizabeth Meza, the aunt on Melodee's father's side, described her mental state with the same phrase: extremely mentally unstable. They said it not in anger, but in helpless recognition and admission that they had seen warning signs long before the police ever arrived at the door on Mars Avenue. According to family members, Ashley's descent began after the fatal motorcycle crash that killed her husband Rubiel Meza in 2016. In the months that followed, she reportedly tried to end her own life more than once. Police and social workers visited the home that same year after reports of neglect. The CPS case notes described unsanitary conditions, and a mother in need of immediate psychiatric evaluation. CPS temporarily placed infant Melodee in protective care, but she was later returned when Ashley agreed to treatment. It was a fragile victory. Relatives say she checked herself into a mental health facility twice between 2016 and 2018, yet each discharge seemed to deepen her distrust of the system. From that point on, she refused therapy and medication, insisting that she could manage on her own. Neighbors recall subtle signs that something inside the house was wrong. Curtains were always drawn, even during the day. Visitors were never allowed past the doorstep. A faint odor of smoke sometimes drifted from the chimney at odd hours. One resident told reporters that on several nights, he saw orange light flickering through the slats of the blinds. as if paper were burning in the fireplace. When police later searched the house, they found ash containing fragments of documents, possibly mail or notebooks, but no conclusive evidence of what had been destroyed. It was as though Ashley had been erasing traces of the outside world one sheet at a time. The isolation only deepened as years passed. By 2023, she had stopped leaving the property altogether, relying entirely on online grocery deliveries and prepaid credit cards. Even her mother, Lori Miranda, had not spoken to her in over 2 years. Lori described her daughter's home as a place that stopped belonging to time. She recalled visiting once, unannounced, in 29. There were dishes piled up, lights off, spoiled food in the refrigerator. Melodee was sitting quietly on the couch, staring at the television. Ashley told me to leave. She said the world outside was dangerous. Psychologists who have reviewed the case from afar refer to Ashley's behavior as consistent with isolation syndrome, a cluster of symptoms that can develop when prolonged loneliness merges with paranoia and grief. People suffering from the syndrome gradually lose the ability to distinguish between internal fears and external threats. Their physical seclusion becomes psychological, the home turns into a bunker, and control, however small, becomes the only defense against chaos. In Ashley's situation, isolation was both the symptom and the coping mechanism. She controlled everything she could: locked doors, drawn curtains, contact limited to delivery drivers who left packages at the gate. Dr. Bethany Marshall, a Los Angeles psychoanalyst who commented on the case for national media, explained that such isolation often leads to persecutory delusions. In these delusions, the sufferer interprets every request for accountability, such as school attendance or wellness checks, as a threat to autonomy. When reality becomes too painful, the person constructs a smaller, safer world, Dr. Marshall said. Inside that world, control replaces connection. For Ashley, homeschooling likely became part of that illusion of control. It allowed her to claim she was protecting Melodee from harmful influences, while in fact cutting the girl off from teachers, doctors, and anyone who might have noticed the deterioration at home. Relatives recall that the shift from protective mother to reclusive guardian happened gradually. After the CPS investigation ended, Ashley removed Melodee from preschool and told family members she would teach her herself. At first, she sent photos of worksheets and art projects. Then the updates stopped. Phone numbers changed. By 2021, she was unreachable. When Elizabeth Meza drove to Vandenberg Village that year to drop off a birthday gift, no one answered the door. You could hear movement inside, she said, but no voices. By the summer of 2025, the household existed in almost total secrecy. When Ashley finally emerged to register Melodee for an independent study program in August, it was the first public record of the child's existence in years. Teachers later described Ashley as tense, hyper-vigilant, refusing casual conversation. She filled out forms quickly and declined offers of orientation. 2 months later, both she and her daughter vanished from the school system once more. Investigators studying her psychological profile theorize that Ashley may have experienced a psychotic decompensation, a sudden collapse of reality testing shortly before the disappearance. In such a state, delusions can take two opposing forms: the belief that harm will come from others, or the belief that harming a loved one is the only way to protect them. When authorities confronted her on October 15, she was described as emotionally flat and evasive, neither panicked nor remorseful. Detectives said she repeated phrases like, "I just want peace," and "they keep trying to take everything." Those words hinted at a mind caught between fear and resignation. The accidental harm theory proposes that an episode of psychosis or a suicide attempt may have led to unintended injury to the child. In cases of severe depression combined with isolation, parents sometimes project their hopelessness onto their children, believing that death or disappearance is a form of mercy. The intentional harm variant is darker, that Ashley, overcome by paranoia, believed she was saving Melodee from an imagined threat. Without forensic evidence, investigators cannot determine which, if either, occurred, but the behavioral context lends weight to both. To understand how such tragedy can grow unnoticed, experts emphasize the corrosive power of chronic isolation. Human beings derive emotional regulation from social feedback, small interactions that affirm what is real. When that feedback disappears, perception becomes self-referential, looping endlessly inside the mind. For Ashley, each day spent behind closed blinds likely reinforced her belief that the outside world was hostile. The silence around her became proof that withdrawal was working. Over time, this self-sealing logic may have detached her completely from reality. Neighbors sensed something was wrong but felt powerless. One said he had seen Ashley standing motionless in her driveway late at night, staring up at the sky. Another remembered hearing a child crying once, followed by a woman's voice whispering, it's okay, mommy's here," before everything went silent. Yet none of them called authorities, assuming privacy rather than danger. Isolation, after all, can appear benign until it isn't. The image of Ashley feeding her delusions by burning papers in the fireplace has become a symbol of her unraveling, each flame consuming evidence of connection letters, bills, perhaps even school notices. Psychologists call it a ritual of purification, a desperate act to erase external control. In that dim orange glow, one can almost see the line where paranoia turns destructive. If the isolation syndrome theory is correct, Melodee's disappearance might not have begun as a crime, but as a catastrophic expression of a mother's illness. The tragedy lies in how predictable it was: a grieving widow, untreated mental illness, a child removed from oversight, and a community that mistook withdrawal for independence. Whether Ashley acted out of delusion, despair, or a moment of unthinking rage, the outcome is the same: a small life erased by the slow collapse of another. In the end, this theory does not cast Ashley solely as a villain, but as a cautionary figure in a society that often leaves the mentally ill to fend for themselves. The home on Mars Avenue was not just a crime scene. It was a case study in the consequences of unchecked isolation. Behind its locked doors, control replaced connection, fear replaced trust, and a mother's love, warped by illness, may have turned fatally inward. Until evidence says otherwise, investigators and family members can only hope that somewhere, beyond the smoke and silence, Melodee is still alive. Among the more hopeful, though still troubling, theories in the case of Melodee Buzzard is the idea that she may still be alive, hidden somewhere by her mother, Ashley Buzzard, and possibly being moved from place to place to avoid detection. This theory stands apart from the darker speculations of violence or tragedy. It imagines instead a prolonged act of concealment born from fear, delusion, or an obsessive desire for control. Yet even this relatively hopeful scenario exposes deep systemic failures and disturbing questions about how a child can disappear from every layer of public oversight without anyone noticing for more than a year. The foundation for this hypothesis lies in Melodee's history of homeschooling, which stretched back almost her entire life. After her father's death in 2016, Ashley withdrew her daughter from conventional education, telling relatives that she wanted to teach her in peace. Homeschooling, while legal and often beneficial, created what investigators now call an administrative blind spot. Children educated at home in California are not required to meet teachers face-to-face or undergo regular welfare checks, as long as a parent files an affidavit declaring their intent to homeschool. Ashley never did. By avoiding that paperwork, she effectively removed her daughter from all institutional records. For years, Melodee existed only within the four walls of a house whose blinds were always drawn. That invisibility makes the hidden child theory plausible. If anyone could disappear a child without immediate detection, it would be a parent already skilled at isolation. When Ashley finally appeared at the Mission Valley Independent Study Program in August 2025, she was, in essence, reintroducing Melodee to the system she had avoided for nearly a decade. 2 months later, both vanished again. Investigators believe the timing may not be coincidental. As schools and social services tightened oversight in the wake of pandemic-era misuse cases, Ashley may have sensed that another CPS evaluation was imminent. Her earlier encounters with Child Protective Services had left her deeply suspicious of authority. In her mind, re-entering the system could mean losing her daughter permanently. If fear was the driving force, the act of concealment might have seemed like protection. Relatives believe Ashley could have taken Melodee on the road to prevent CPS or her late husband's family from asserting custody. The extended Mesa family, who had publicly expressed concern about the child's welfare, may have represented to Ashley the same threat that government agencies did outsiders trying to take Melodee away. Under this view, the trip to Nebraska in early October 2025 was not an aimless journey but a deliberate flight. The open road offered anonymity. Motels and rest stops offered places to hide in plain sight. When the rental car was returned, perhaps Ashley had left Melodee with someone she trusted, believing that separation was the only way to keep her safe. This theory aligns with the FBI's continued emphasis on finding a living sighting. Federal agents have never publicly labeled the case a homicide, choosing instead to categorize it as a missing person investigation. That choice matters. Homicide cases look for remains, while missing person units search for life. The Bureau's Behavioral Analysis Unit considers the possibility that Ashley might have concealed Melodee under a new identity or in a secluded community, possibly within a religious or homeschooling network sympathetic to parents avoiding state oversight. Cases like these are notoriously difficult to solve, because the child often leaves no digital footprint, no school attendance, no medical visits, no online activity, and can be passed off as another family's relative or foster child. Still, investigators rate the likelihood of this scenario as low to moderate, largely because Ashley returned home alone. When she reappeared in Vandenberg Village after the Nebraska trip, she offered no evidence that Melodee was alive. She refused to answer whether her daughter was safe, responding to questions with phrases like, "I just want to be left alone." If she were hiding the child intentionally, one might expect a slip of relief or pride, a mother's subtle reassurance that her child was beyond reach but alive. Instead, her silence felt absolute. Law enforcement has described her demeanor as flat, affectless, detached, consistent with deep psychological withdrawal rather than the guarded confidence of someone orchestrating a long-term concealment. Even so, investigators have not ruled out the possibility that Melodee is alive. They continue to distribute her photo nationwide, following a simple but powerful principle: visibility saves lives. According to the NCMEC, 1 in 6 missing children in the United States is found as a direct result of someone recognizing their photograph. In practical terms, that means every social media post, every poster taped to a lamppost, every news broadcast replay could be the one that leads to a call. Public awareness remains the most effective investigative tool in missing child cases where evidence is scarce. Psychologically, the hidden child theory also fits a pattern seen in other cases where parents suffering from paranoia retreat into secrecy. The decision to isolate the child is often framed as an act of love, protecting them from perceived harm rather than an act of violence. The longer the parent lives in fear, the more that fear solidifies into conviction. In that self-contained logic, disappearing becomes proof of safety. Ashley's known habits: ordering groceries online, avoiding conversation, burning papers in her fireplace, reveal someone already practicing small acts of disappearance long before her daughter went missing. Removing Melodee from the world entirely may have seemed like the final, perfect form of control. Critics of the theory argue that survival after so many months without verification is unlikely. The absence of any physical evidence, no confirmed sightings, no communication, no recorded purchases indicating care for a child, suggests that concealment would require a network of cooperation Ashley does not appear to have. She was a loner, estranged from family, with no known close friends or connections. Moving a 9-year-old across states undetected would demand resources and emotional stability she lacked. Yet the FBI maintains that stranger things have happened. Children hidden for years have resurfaced in foster systems or small communities under false identities. Until definitive proof emerges, they are compelled to keep the hope alive. This possibility, that Melodee might still be somewhere out there, unseen but breathing, haunts both investigators and the public. It is the fragile thread that separates tragedy from endurance. The posters bearing her smile still hang in shop windows across Santa Barbara County, faded now by sunlight. Each time someone glances at them, they renew a silent pact with the missing that disappearance is not the same as death. And yet, the longer Ashley remains silent, the more that hope bends under its own weight. If Melodee truly is alive, Hidden intentionally or passed into another's care, her mother holds the key to ending the search. The FBI's statement echoes this frustration. Our priority is the child's safety. If she's alive, we only ask that someone speak. That plea captures the paradox of this case. A mother who once isolated her daughter in the name of protection now isolates the truth itself. For those watching from the outside, one question grows louder with every passing day, the same question whispered at vigils, printed on posters, and repeated across social media feeds. If Melodee is still alive, why won't her mother say so? Of all the theories surrounding the disappearance of 9-year-old Melodee Buzzard, perhaps the most haunting and strangely hopeful is the belief that she may still be alive. It suggests that Melodee was not harmed or lost, but hidden, deliberately shielded from the world by her mother, Ashley Buzzard, in an act born of paranoia and fear. This possibility keeps investigators working and relatives praying, but it also exposes a chilling reality that a child can vanish completely within the cracks of a system built on trust. For years, Melodee lived outside of public view under the guise of homeschooling. After her father, Rubiel Meza, died in 2016, Ashley withdrew from society, removing her daughter from traditional education and vowing to raise her alone. Homeschooling provided both comfort and cover. In California, the system relies on parents to file an affidavit and maintain minimal records of a child's education. Without that paperwork, there are no teachers, counselors, or administrators watching for signs of neglect. As long as no one asks questions, a child can quietly disappear into what experts call an administrative blind spot. For Melodee, that blind spot became a void one where her existence depended entirely on a mother who no longer trusted anyone outside her front door. When Ashley and Melodee appeared at the Mission Valley Independent Study Program in August 2025, it was the first official record of the girl's life in years. Teachers saw a shy child standing beside a nervous mother who rushed through paperwork and avoided conversation. 2 months later, both were gone again. The school's unanswered calls triggered the chain of events that led to the police search. Investigators now suspect that Ashley may have sensed renewed scrutiny from CPS or feared interference from her late husband's relatives. Having lost contact with them for nearly a decade, she might have viewed their growing concern as a threat. To her paranoid mind, hiding Melodee, perhaps moving her far from California, was the only way to preserve control. The evidence supports at least part of this theory. Rental car records show that on October 7, 2025, Ashley traveled with her daughter in a white Chevrolet Malibu, driving hundreds of miles from their home in Santa Barbara County. GPS data and toll records suggest a route reaching as far as Nebraska. When the car was returned, Ashley was alone. She offered no explanation for where Melodee was or why they had gone. For the FBI, that silence was enough to treat the case as a multi-state missing person investigation. Agents continue to chase any hint of a living sighting, a credible report that Melodee may still be somewhere, possibly under a different name or within an insular community where outsiders rarely ask questions. Such cases are not unheard of. The NCMEC reports that 1 in 6 missing children in the United States is found because someone recognizes a photo. These are the stories of children hidden by family members, religious groups, or survivalist parents convinced the world was unsafe. They often surface years later, malnourished but alive, their existence betrayed by a neighbor's curiosity or a chance encounter at a doctor's office. That statistic, 1 in 6, fuels every press release, every public appeal, every poster with Melodee's face. It means there is still reason to hope. To many observers, Ashley's long history of isolation fits the pattern of parental concealment. Her world had grown smaller and more paranoid each year, curtains drawn, doors locked, groceries delivered online, mail burned in the fireplace. This was a woman who had already erased most of her connections to the outside world. Hiding her daughter from imagined danger may have felt like the logical next step. Psychologists describe this phenomenon as protective delusion, when a parent becomes so consumed by fear that withdrawal feels like safety. Within this twisted logic, keeping Melodee invisible was proof of love. Still, the theory remains low to moderate in likelihood. Ashley eventually returned home alone, and her behavior since then has not matched the patterns of someone maintaining a secret life for a hidden child. When police questioned her at the Vandenberg village home, she did not display the defensive energy of a woman guarding a secret. Instead, she appeared withdrawn, emotionless, detached. Her neighbors describe her as existing, like a ghost, rarely leaving the house, speaking to no one, seemingly trapped in a fog of denial. Investigators interpret that as mental collapse rather than careful deception. If Melodee were truly being concealed, Ashley would need a network, money, transportation, trusted contacts, none of which she appears to have. Even so, the FBI refuses to close the door on hope. They continue to circulate Melodee's photograph across state lines, reminding the public that every set of eyes matters. Agents stress that cases of parental hiding can stretch for years before discovery. The fact that no remains have been found and no evidence of violence exists means the possibility of life cannot be dismissed. They track missing child tips from motel registries, church directories, and homeschooling cooperatives, any environment where a parent and child could live quietly under assumed identities. Every week, leads trickle in, most of them false, but the search endures because, statistically, it can work. For Melodee's extended family, that faint chance is both a blessing and a torment. Her grandmother, Lori Miranda, has said she dreams of her granddaughter appearing at a grocery store one day, older but unharmed. Her aunts imagine her living somewhere rural, perhaps attending a small local church under another name. It's the only way to sleep at night, one relative told a reporter, believing she's still out there. Yet the same hope that sustains them also sharpens the moral question at the heart of the case. If Melodee is alive, why won't her mother say so? What purpose does silence serve? If Ashley's goal was protection, she could end the suffering with a single sentence confirmation that her daughter is safe. Instead, she maintains a wall of quiet so impenetrable that it has become its own form of cruelty. The line between fear and indifference has blurred beyond recognition. Each day that passes without an answer erodes the optimism that once surrounded the investigation. Posters fade in sunlight, online campaigns slow, and the name Melodee Buzzard risks joining the long list of children whose stories end in uncertainty rather than resolution. Still, the possibility remains the slimmest, most stubborn possibility that somewhere, in a cabin, a shelter, or a borrowed home under another name, a girl is waiting for the world to remember her. The hidden child. Theory may never be proven, but it carries a message as vital as any conviction: visibility saves lives. If one person, one viewer, one passerby recognizes her image, the story could still turn toward hope. Until then, the case remains balanced between two realities: one of tragedy, one of survival, and a question that refuses to fade. If Melodee Buzzard is still alive, why won't her mother speak? When the SBCSO first knocked on the door of the small house on Mars Avenue on October 14, 2025, they expected a routine well-being check. A school administrator had reported that 9-year-old Melodee Buzzard had been absent for months, and repeated calls to her mother, Ashley Buzzard, had gone unanswered. The officers arrived at dusk, the front porch dimly lit, curtains drawn tight across every window. They rang the doorbell, waited, and heard nothing. After several minutes, they left a notice requesting that Ashley contact them immediately. When they returned the following morning, October 15, she finally answered. Her demeanor, officers later said, was detached and defensive. She refused to explain where her daughter was, only repeating that she was stressed and didn't want to be bothered. There was no sign of Melodee inside the house. That encounter turned a welfare check into an official missing person investigation. Detectives secured a search warrant and entered the property later that evening. What they found deepened the mystery. The house was cluttered but eerily quiet, as if frozen in time. Toys were stacked neatly in a corner, a child's bed unmade but undisturbed. The refrigerator held little food. One detective noted the faint smell of smoke from the fireplace, where partially burned papers lay in the grate. There was no sign of struggle, no trace of the little girl, only absence. Neighbors told police they hadn't seen Melodee outside for months, maybe even a year. Within hours, the case was escalated to the Sheriff's Criminal Investigations Division. Lieutenant Chris Gottschall, who would become the public face of the investigation, confirmed to local media that the girl's disappearance was being treated as at risk. In his first statement, he credited the Lompoc Unified School District for their vigilance. The school deserves credit for recognizing that something wasn't right, reaching out, and continuing to assist with this investigation, he said. That awareness helped narrow a significant gap in the timeline and brought us closer to understanding what happened to Melodee. It was a rare moment of acknowledgement that, had the school not intervened, the child might have remained missing indefinitely. The following days saw a flurry of coordinated efforts between SBCSO, local law enforcement, and federal agencies. Detectives canvassed the Vandenberg Village neighborhood, interviewing residents and collecting video from doorbell and security cameras. Footage from nearby streets showed Ashley's white Chevrolet Malibu leaving the area in early October. Investigators traced the vehicle to a rental agency in Lompoc, which confirmed that the car had been rented in Ashley's name. GPS logs and toll data indicated that the car had traveled east through California, Nevada, and into Nebraska, a journey of nearly 600 miles. By the time the car was returned, Ashley was back in California but alone. This discovery prompted the FBI to join the investigation on October 20, transforming it into a multi-state search. Federal agents began retracing the route, checking gas stations, motels, and rest stops along the way. They pulled credit card and bank statements, requested cell tower pings, and cross-referenced travel records from Nebraska law enforcement. One FBI agent told reporters off the record that the task was like tracking a ghost. There was no evidence of hotel check-ins, no phone calls, no witnesses who could place a child with Ashley during her trip. The last verifiable moment in Melodee's timeline remained that October 7 departure from California. Meanwhile, the sheriff's office continued to search the property. Forensic teams used luminol testing, reviewed trash, and even inspected the fireplace where burned papers had been found. Every search returned the same result: inconclusive. The absence of evidence became its own kind of evidence, proof of deliberate erasure, or at least a life sealed off from scrutiny. As investigators expanded their efforts, they issued a public advisory, urging residents not to conduct independent searches or confront Ashley. While well-intentioned, the statement read, "These efforts could unintentionally interfere with investigative work already in progress." The plea was a response to growing community frustration. By the third week of October, neighbors and online activists had begun organizing under the banner, "Where is Melodee?" Candlelight vigils and peaceful protests formed outside Ashley's home, with participants holding signs that read, "Tell us the truth," and "Won't stop looking." Deputies maintained a presence nearby to prevent confrontations. The investigation's momentum soon attracted the attention of national media. TV Channel aired an in-depth segment featuring legal analysis, debating whether Ashley's silence could justify charges of child endangerment. Former prosecutor Bob Bianchi called for stronger intervention powers to compel cooperation in cases involving minors, while psychologist Dr. Sue Kornbluth advocates compassion, arguing that Ashley's behavior points to mental instability rather than guilt. The exchange reflects the public's growing polarization. Half the country wanted accountability. The other half saw a tragic psychological collapse. A few days later, the case reached an even larger audience when Nancy Grace, on her syndicated crime program, dissected the timeline with her signature urgency. Her coverage reframed the story not just as a mystery, but as a moral reckoning. A little girl, 9 years old, vanishes, and the only person who can tell us where she is won't open her mouth, Grace declared. The episode went viral, amassing millions of views on social media and flooding the sheriff's office with tips, most of them false. ABC News and LA Times soon followed, running detailed features that linked Melodee's disappearance to broader issues of homeschooling oversight and CPS limitations. The ABC report emphasized how the case exposed the dangerous gap between parental rights and child protection. The coverage elevated local tragedy into national debate, and with it came intense pressure on investigators. The sheriff's office, typically tight-lipped, began issuing near-daily updates to manage speculation. Behind the scenes, the collaboration between SBCSO and FBI grew increasingly technical. Analysts combed through data extracted from Ashley's phone and laptop, mapping timestamps and browser histories to identify patterns. Teams in multiple states checked child welfare databases, comparing Melodee's photo against records of unidentified minors. When that yielded no results, agents turned to facial recognition technology, scanning security footage from airports, bus stations, and highway cameras. None produced a match. While law enforcement followed digital trails, the public narrative spun faster than ever. Social media filled with competing theories, some accusing Ashley of harm, others insisting she had placed her daughter in secret care. The sheriff's office repeatedly reminded the public that the case remained open and that the goal was not blame but discovery. Still, the silence from inside the Mars Avenue home continued to fuel outrage. Each night, protesters' chants echoed down the quiet residential street, the same question repeated again and again: where is Melodee? For investigators, the question was both simple and impossible. Each lead led back to the same stark reality: a journey to Nebraska, a returned rental car, and a mother who said nothing. In press conferences, Lit Gottschall maintained measured optimism, but acknowledged the weight of uncertainty. "Our priority remains verifying Melodee's location and welfare," he said. "We will follow every lead, no matter how small, until we have those answers." Today, the combined investigation between SBCSO and the FBI continues, its focus shifting from physical searches to data analysis and behavioral profiling. The community still holds vigils. News programs still revisit the story, and somewhere amid the noise between protest chants, media headlines, and official statements lingers the same haunting silence that began at all: a mother's refusal to speak, and a child whose trail ends in the Nebraska plains. What began as a simple welfare check has become a test of persistence for investigators, a mirror for media ethics, and a lesson for every community that once assumed safety was guaranteed. The disappearance of Melodee Buzzard is more than a family tragedy. It is an indictment of a system that failed to notice a child's slow erasure from public life. For over a year, no school, no agency, no neighbor, and no government official realized that a 9-year-old girl had vanished. Her case exposes the structural weaknesses that allow vulnerable children to slip quietly through bureaucratic cracks, particularly those hidden under the umbrella of homeschooling. In California, where the law gives parents broad autonomy to educate their children at home, oversight depends almost entirely on voluntary compliance. Parents are required to file a private school affidavit once a year, confirming that their home meets the minimum standards of a private institution. But there is no mechanism to verify compliance, no inspections, and no consequence for non-filing. If the affidavit is ignored, the child simply disappears from the state's educational radar. That is precisely what happened in Melodee's case. After withdrawing her daughter from public school, Ashley Buzzard never filed the affidavit. For years, no one noticed. Without official paperwork, Melodee ceased to exist in any state database. No attendance records, no test scores, no teacher interactions, no health evaluations, nothing. The system, which assumes that parents act in good faith, created what investigators later called a black hole of accountability. It was a loophole large enough to swallow an entire childhood. This gap is not unique to California. Across the United States, homeschooling regulations vary wildly from state to state. Some, like Pennsylvania and New York, require periodic reviews, portfolios, and standardized testing. Others, like Texas and Idaho, impose almost no oversight at all. California falls somewhere in the middle: enough regulation to appear responsible, but not enough to prevent misuse. The result is a patchwork of laws that depend on geography rather than need. A child's visibility and safety hinges on where they happen to live. The consequences of this inconsistency have surfaced before. The Turpin case, uncovered in 2018, shocked the nation when 13 siblings were found imprisoned and starved by their parents in a Southern California home. They had been homeschooled. On paper, their mother dutifully filing affidavits each year, while in reality, the children were chained to their beds. Their isolation went unnoticed for years because the law equated paperwork with well-being. Another cautionary tale is the case of Harmony Montgomery, a 5-year-old from New Hampshire who vanished in 2019. Despite multiple red flags and missed welfare checks, her absence went unreported for nearly 2 years. Like Melodee, she existed only in old records and fading memories until it was too late. These parallels highlight a painful truth. When the law relies on trust without verification, it transforms into negligence. The absence of a national standard for homeschooling oversight means that local agencies must navigate a maze of conflicting rules. There is no centralized database linking schools, child welfare agencies, and law enforcement. If a child disappears from one system, no alert triggers in another. A student's file can simply vanish, as Melodee's did, with no one obligated to ask why. Former FBI investigator and private security consultant Manuel Gomez has been outspoken about this flaw. In a televised interview, he proposed what he called the national visibility requirement. His idea was deceptively simple: every homeschooled child should participate in a brief, weekly video check-in with a certified educator or social worker. It could be 10 minutes on FaceTime, Gomez explained. You verify that the child is present, healthy, and safe. That's all it takes. To critics who argued that such measures would infringe on parental rights, Gomez countered that parental rights end where a child's safety begins. We already monitor bank accounts, driver's licenses, and professional credentials, he said. Why not the lives of children who have no voice? While some dismissed Gomez's proposal as unrealistic, others saw it as a necessary evolution. The technology already exists, and the cost of inaction is measured in missing faces on bulletin boards. If a weekly check-in had been required, Melodee's absence would have been noticed within days, not a year later. Such reform, however, faces political resistance. Homeschooling advocates fear government intrusion, while underfunded agencies balk at the logistics of nationwide monitoring. Between ideology and inertia, children like Melodee remain invisible. Beyond the legal vacuum, the case also reveals a cultural failure: the quiet complicity of communities that choose not to question. In Vandenberg Village, neighbors noticed the drawn curtains, the unopened mail, the mother who never spoke. They saw the signs of withdrawal but assumed privacy, not danger. Silence became its own form of participation. As one local resident admitted, you don't want to pry. You figure the school must be keeping track. But the school wasn't, and by the time anyone realized, Melodee was gone. The media, too, plays a double-edged role. Once the story broke, networks amplified national outrage, forcing law enforcement to act swiftly and transparently. Their coverage mobilized tips, exposed systemic weaknesses, and kept pressure on officials who might otherwise have allowed the case to fade. Yet that spotlight only shines after tragedy. The press can ignite accountability, but it cannot replace the vigilance that should have prevented the disappearance in the first place. This interplay between silence and spectacle defines much of modern child protection. When systems fail quietly, it takes the noise of public outrage to correct them. But outrage arrives too late for the victims. The gap between privacy and protection remains one of the most dangerous spaces in American life, a space where well-meaning laws become hiding places for neglect, and where respect for family autonomy eclipses a child's right to be seen. In Melodee's case, every level of that system failed: the educational network that lost track of her, the welfare apparatus that stopped checking, and the community that mistook isolation for safety. The pattern echoes through every story like hers: Harmony, Turpin, countless others whose names never reached the news. Each disappearance is not just a personal loss, but a collective one, proof that visibility is the first condition of protection. Perhaps the harshest indictment comes from the phrase circulating among advocates after Melodee's disappearance: if a child exists only on paper, then every system is asleep. Those words capture the essence of this tragedy: a society that measures safety by forms and signatures, that trusts paperwork more than presence, is one that mistakes documentation for care. Until there is a system that ensures every child is seen, heard, and accounted for, not just enrolled stories like Melodee Buzzard's will repeat, and the silence that hid her will remain the loudest sound of all. In the end, every theory about Melodee Buzzard's disappearance leads back to the same haunting constant: her mother's silence. Whether one believes that Ashley Buzzard hid her daughter to protect her, harmed her during a psychological collapse, or simply lost control of a desperate plan, the truth remains trapped behind her refusal to speak. That silence has become the gravitational center of this tragedy, drawing in law enforcement, family members, and the public alike. It is a silence filled with absence of answers, of accountability, of a 9-year-old girl whose voice has been swallowed by fear. Over the past months, investigators have mapped 3 main hypotheses. The first, the parental concealment theory, imagines a frightened mother who took her daughter on the run, believing the world was trying to take her child away. The second, the mental breakdown theory, sees a woman undone by grief and paranoia, whose fragile mind blurred the line between love and destruction. The third, the hidden child theory, holds on to the faintest thread of hope that Melodee might still be alive somewhere, perhaps kept hidden by a mother convinced it was the only way to keep her safe. None of these explanations are fully provable, yet all orbit the same idea: silence as both symptom and weapon. For the Buzzard and Meza families, that silence is unbearable. In interviews, Melodee's grandmother Lori Miranda has repeated the same sentence through tears. "I just want to know if she's okay." Her words carry the raw simplicity of grief unrelieved by closure. Melodee's aunts, Vicky Shade and Elizabeth Meza, still hang her photos on walls, light candles, and attend vigils. They are not demanding punishment, they are begging for acknowledgement, for the smallest assurance that the child they loved is not gone in vain. Each day that Ashley refuses to speak deepens their uncertainty. Not knowing whether to mourn or to hope is a kind of living purgatory. The emotional devastation ripples beyond the family, touching a society forced to confront its own complicity. Melodee's story mirrors a collective fear, the fear of looking too closely, of intruding, of asking uncomfortable questions about what happens behind closed doors. In communities like Vandenberg Village, politeness often outweighs curiosity. Neighbors saw curtains drawn for years and said nothing. Schools lost track of a student and assumed someone else was responsible. Institutions built to protect children relied on systems of self-reporting that collapse the moment trust is broken. The truth is painful. A society that values privacy above vigilance creates the perfect conditions for invisibility. Psychologists have noted that the isolation that consumed Ashley Buzzard reflects a deeper cultural phenomenon, an epidemic of disconnection. We live in neighborhoods where we do not know our neighbors, where mental illness is hidden behind manicured lawns, where parents are praised for independence even when it shades into neglect. Ashley's withdrawal, while extreme, is not alien. It is the logical endpoint of a culture that treats self-sufficiency as virtue and vulnerability as shame. Her silence is not just her own. It is the silence we all practice when we look away from suffering. At the intersection of this personal collapse and societal apathy lies the central moral of Melodee's story. Tragedies like this do not begin in a single violent moment. They germinate in the spaces where empathy erodes. They grow in unasked questions, in ignored warning signs, in bureaucratic checkboxes that replace human contact. The crime, if one can call it that, may not have started with an act of violence at all. It may have begun years earlier with untreated grief, with institutional neglect, with every missed opportunity to see a child who was quietly vanishing. And so the story demands not just investigation, but introspection. What does it say about a society when a child can be missing for an entire year before anyone notices? What does it reveal about our systems of care, our schools, our neighborhoods, and our collective sense of responsibility? The answer is not comforting. It suggests that we have grown accustomed to silence, that we interpret quiet homes as safe homes, and solitude as self-sufficiency. It suggests that we only pay attention once a tragedy becomes a headline. In this sense, Melodee's disappearance is not only a mystery but a mirror. It reflects the fragility of our safety nets and the illusion that danger always announces itself. It reminds us that neglect can look calm, and that the absence of noise is not the presence of peace. The contrast between the loud national outrage after the fact and the quiet indifference before, it is the truest measure of our collective failure. The message of this story can be distilled into a single, chilling truth. Crimes do not always begin with knives. Sometimes they begin with wounds no one heals. When an entire system stops listening, silence becomes the killer. Those words should echo far beyond Santa Barbara County. They apply to every community, every agency, every bystander who believes. It's not my business. Because it is. Protecting children requires more than sympathy. It demands vigilance, communication, and the courage to question what seems normal. As the investigation continues, the FBI and SBCSO still ask for the public's help. They urge anyone with information to call the official hotline at 805-681-4150 or the anonymous tip line at 805-681-4171. They ask the public to share Melodee's photo, to keep her face visible, to keep her name alive. Visibility is the only antidote to disappearance. The community that once stayed silent now speaks in unison, chanting her name at vigils, writing messages under her photo online. They have learned, painfully, that silence protects no one. Their renewed awareness is perhaps the first step toward a culture that listens before it's too late. Melodee's story ends for now with questions, not answers. A house still stands on Mars Avenue, quiet as ever. Inside, a mother refuses to speak. Outside, the world has learned to listen. Whether the truth that eventually emerges brings sorrow or relief, its lesson will remain the same, that a society which forgets to see its children will one day wake to find them gone. And that sometimes, the most dangerous sound in the world is not a scream, but the sound of nothing at all.